You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Whistleblower Heroes here on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Ella. First off, what is a whistleblower? I always like to start out with this one. A whistleblower is a person who makes public disclosures of wrongdoing, corruption, and crime, and these courageous people often suffer retaliatory actions because of their disclosures. But in the end, many of these people are often the catalyst for needed change and are eventually lauded as heroes, and I'm here to celebrate these heroes and give them a platform because shining a light on wrongdoing, wherever it occurs, plays an important role in keeping society peaceful, free, and just. So with me today, I have a very special man and a whistleblower, Mr. Mark Whitacre. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me, Ella.
Well, thank you very much. It's such a privilege to have this opportunity to interview you. So before we get started, I want to share a little bit about you and give a bio. I'll tell you a little bit. Mark Whitacre is an Ivy League PhD and the highest ranked executive of any Fortune 500 company to become a whistleblower in U.S. history, and is responsible for uncovering the ADM price fixing scandal in the early 1990s. Mark is Chief Operating Officer of CBMC, an organization that has impacted his life greatly the past 2 decades. Since December of 2006, he has been the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Science Officer at Cypress Systems, Inc. His undercover work with the FBI during the ADM scandal was the inspiration for the major motion picture The Informant, starring Matt Damon as Mark Whitacre. Drawing from his unique history, Mark provides a one-of-a-kind insight into corporate ethics, corporate greed, and the warning signs of a flawed corporate leadership. And here's some of his education. After simultaneously completing BS and MS degrees at Ohio State University, Mark then earned his PhD degree at Cornell University in nutritional biochemistry. Mark then worked for multiple Fortune 500 companies, including Ralston Purina, Decatur, and Archer Daniels Midland. Mark was hired at ADM when he was 32, and as the president of the BioProducts Division from its launch, was the youngest divisional president in the history of the company. And in 6 years, their fermentation complex became one of the largest in the world. At age 35, he became corporate vice president of ADM and was a leading candidate to become the next company president. Dr. Whitacre has extensive international business experience, having lived 4 years in West Germany working for an international company. He also has been involved with 2 international companies in the Southeast Asia market and traveled the region dozens of times. Mark's more than 2 decades of top management experience at Fortune 500 and international companies, as well as his experience with the ADM price-fixing scandal and the FBI, give him a unique, seasoned perspective on leadership in the corporate world. As Mr. Douglas Burris, Chief of U.S. Federal Probation in the Eastern District of Missouri, has stated publicly, the story about Mark Whitacre's redemption and second chance is one of the most inspirational stories of our time. So again, I just want to say thank you, Mark.
Oh, and thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
And I know you were just hopping off a plane. I know you're a very busy man, so I'm glad you were able to make it on time.
No, I was excited to share with you today.
Okay, so maybe we can go back to, when you maybe first started working for the company, at ADM, how that happened, what led you to that particular company. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I was actually working in West Germany with another very large company, a Fortune 500 company called Decatur Chemical. Its name is now Evonik, and this would have been in the late 80s. And I was vice president responsible for acquisitions and mergers and joint ventures. And I was actually doing a joint venture with ADM, with the ADM management. So I got to know the CEO very well, the vice chairman and the president very well. Got to know the top executives basically of ADM quite well during that time by doing joint ventures with ADM, with Archer Daniels Midland. And I was 2 years in New York with Decatur, 4 years in Germany. And as I was working on projects with ADM for a couple of years, they offered me to be the divisional president of their biotech division, which was even going to be much larger and a lot larger investment than what Decatur was. So at age 32 and full of ambition, and this would have been 28 years ago, would have been 1989. I just couldn't imagine. It really, at that time, it was an opportunity of a lifetime. Corporate jet and the whole bit. Number 4 executive, basically, out of 32,000 employees in the 56th largest company on the Fortune 500 at that time.
That's very impressive. And so you were working at this company and you discovered fraud. Can you tell us a little bit around the circumstances that you discovered this?
Yeah, shortly after I joined the company in 1989, I would hear rumors. I would ask like a certain executive that seemed to be very successful, and the CEO was meeting with him often. The vice chairman would be meeting him often. This was my first few months in the company. And I asked other employees, I said, other executives, I said, now, what does he do? He seems quite important. The CEO's in and out of his office a lot. The vice chairman is. And they said, oh, yeah, he's the price fixer. And I said, what? What is that? They said, yeah, he's the price fixer. He's the one that gets together with our competitors and fixes the prices of our ingredients. And I'd say to the other executives, wow, that's illegal. I mean, breaking antitrust laws. And they say, yeah, but in the commodity business, everybody does it and you have to do it. And at that point, I was so excited about being at ADM, and I was divisional. Each division, which was 4 separate divisions, were run like separate companies, almost like subsidiaries. So even though my first few months, and I would hear that described to me, I looked at it at that time, Ella. I looked at it like, well, I'm president of our own division. I just won't allow that in our division, and we're really a separate company than what the other divisions were. So I really kind of kept it separate from our division, that rumor. But then a couple of years later, when the company really got to know me and trust me, and I got very close with the CEO and the vice chairman, I reported to the vice chairman, and he came to my office and gave me a huge check, a bonus check, and a huge set of stock options. It was almost $1 million worth of stock options. And he said, and he commented, he said, well, I'm going to start now teaching you how we run our business, how we run our company. And he told me he was going to assign a mentor to me for a year or two, at least for a year. And when he mentioned the mentor's name, then I knew what was going on. They were basically now getting the price fixer involved in my division, expecting me to do the same. And, at that time, Ella, I was only a couple years there. I would have been about 34 then because I joined at 32. And our CEO was 75 years old. Our president was 69. I just saw so much opportunity, like being half their age, plenty of opportunity to continue to move up. And so and it was right immediately after he gave me this huge bonus and huge set of stock options, and I just couldn't imagine walking away at that time. But what happened was my wife could tell something changed at that point. She could tell something was weighing heavily on me. And it was during this time, for those first few months, where I was being mentored or being trained how to be involved with price fixing with the ingredients in the division that I was president of, the biotech division. Products like citric acid and lactic acid and lysine, and basically food additives and feed additives. Food additives that would be like in beverage like Coca-Cola or Kellogg's cereal or Campbell's soup. It'd be difficult to buy a food off the shelf, a processed food or a beverage that doesn't have something from ADM in it. They're one of the largest food additive companies in the world. And so as I was learning how to do this, my wife could just tell. I've known my wife since she was 13 and I was 14. I met her when she was in 7th grade and I was in 8th grade. And she could just tell something was changed. Something was weighing heavy on me. And after about 7 months involved with it, I shared it with her what was going on and what was weighing heavily on me, because she could tell something was up. That's when she encouraged me. She said, boy, this is $1 billion fraud that's been going on for well over a decade. A decade before I even joined the company.
Was this going on with, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just had a quick question. Was this going on across the board where most of the companies participating in this price fixing, to the best of your knowledge?
Or some of the key products for sure. It was going on, and it was proven in court that it was going on for well over a decade, even before I joined the company, well over a decade. And definitely some of the major products. I mean, ADM spent hundreds of millions of dollars in class action suits back to customers. I mean, Coca-Cola alone won a $400 million reimbursement from the price fixing, and ADM paid a $100 million fine to the government. So, I mean, this really cost them hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars once this got exposed, hundreds of millions. And really I really give credit, it's really to my wife, that she really encouraged me. She said, this is $1 billion fraud. You've got to expose this. And the day that I shared it with my wife, I shared it with the FBI. The very day I shared it with my wife, a case that was going on for about 12 years, and I was involved about 7 months at that point when she could tell something was weighing heavy on me.
Well, what did that day look like? So she had asked you to disclose this information, and you called the FBI that day?
Well, basically, the FBI, Decatur, Illinois is a small town, about 80,000 people town. Decatur, Illinois, central Illinois, about 3 hours south of Chicago. And ADM is about 30,000 employees. So, I mean, it is the largest company. It's a company town. Most people at ADM, you either work at ADM, you're a spouse of, or you're a child of someone that works at ADM. So the little local FBI office, which was just a one-man office, and he worked in our company a lot because most of the stuff that he did for the FBI was helping ADM. So, I mean, in a matter of knowing the FBI, and the FBI was even working even on another case, even at that point, actually helping ADM, not trying to where ADM became a defendant, for example. So, yeah, that's exactly how it looked like. We knew the FBI. The FBI was already working at other cases. Even when I joined ADM, they had a case going on the Chicago Board of Trade where they had an undercover FBI agent acting like a traitor. But, again, they were working with ADM during that time. So the amazing thing is ADM had the FBI working with them on these little kind of $100,000 cases. But on the same time, they were doing $1 billion case against the customers in the field, basically the processed food companies and the processed beverage companies.
I see.
So, yeah, I shared that with the FBI that very day.
Wow. And what was the response?
Oh, they couldn't believe it. I mean, he was really, real bit. Myself being a divisional president, I mean, he knew the credibility was there. My wife was with me when I was sharing it with them. And I started wearing a wire the next day, the following day. This would have been November 5th, 1992, when I shared with them for about 4 hours. And then I started wearing a wire the next day. And that quickly, within that first day with wearing a wire, and they heard these conversations both within the company and also with our competitors, because price fixing involves working with your competitors. I mean,
what was going on with you? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just curious, what was going on in your head within like 24 hours? All this was happening. I mean, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? I mean, this must have been extremely stressful.
Oh, it was an emotional roller coaster, amazing emotional roller coaster. And basically, the FBI told me then, Ellen said this would be about 6 weeks, probably of wearing a wire. That's kind of about our average, and we would have enough evidence. I wore a wire every day, 9-10 hours a day for 3 years.
Wow.
This became the largest price fixing case in U.S. history.
So the next day you were wearing it, and they've already were gathering information, preparing for their case.
Yeah, maybe not so much preparing for the case the next day. It's just to verify them how serious. The FBI heard all these comments that day before. I would say the next day or two, it was really for them to see, wow, this is true. This is a serious case. Here's conversations in the offices of the management, the top executives of ADM who I report to. There's only 3 executives that were above me. And they heard those conversations, and then they would hear phone conversations, me talking to my competitors, where I was being taught how to do the price fixing. I was already 7 months into it. So they then heard those conversations that you could tell that was an ongoing criminal enterprise in this breaking antitrust laws. Basically, the United States is built on capitalism. That's why prices are fair prices to our consumers. And when you get together and price fix, it's like you're all one company. It's like you're building a monopoly, which is totally against capitalism. I mean, it is a fraud. It's a huge fraud, price fixing is. It's ripping off every consumer that goes to the grocery store in the country.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable, some of this, corporate corruption going on. And the other thing I wanted to kind of weave into the story is that online it's, I read many articles and listened to interviews. You also have been suffering bipolar disorder. So can you let our listeners know how that was affecting you during this time?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I was never diagnosed bipolar prior to that. But with bipolar is, even with a little bit of manic behavior, it can be manageable. But with stress, it can get it into a unmanageable, almost psychotic, almost delusional with stress. And wearing that wire for 3 years, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, every Monday through Friday for 3 years, it definitely took it from a manageable condition to a very delusional and psychotic period during my life, even where I attempted suicide twice. I mean, that's the common denominator. And that's when I was diagnosed with bipolar after I attempted suicide. Yeah, the stress was unbelievable. I mean, when the FBI wired me up at 6 o'clock every morning for 3 years, they'd shave my chest, hook wires to my microphones to my chest every morning at 6 o'clock for 3 years. And when they wired me up, they say, Mark, if these guys get you, they're going to kill you. And to hear that every day for 3 years took a tremendous toll on me at that time, starting at age 34.
Did your wife at one point or at any time think maybe it was a mistake that you decided to work with the FBI?
Yeah, she did. You know, she really thought when we were going to, which encouraged you, almost even forced me. She said, boy, you've got to do this or I'm going to do it for you. But we've got to expose this fraud. This is affecting every consumer. And she was thinking of like people like her grandma and Social Security, where her grocery bill was her largest bill. And here she's paying even higher prices because of this price gouging, this price fixing going on in the food additives in those foods that her grandma would buy. So, you know, she saw that here we're living and flying on a corporate jet and living in mansions and having an 8-car garage by being one of the top executives of one of the biggest companies in the world. But on the same time, this fraud's going on, impacting people that have a tough time, and grocery bill for them and their families and their children is their largest bill. And so she just had a big problem with that. And that's why she encouraged me to blow the whistle that very day that I shared it with her. But she really thought when we told the FBI that they would go tap phones and they would do what they do. She never dreamed that I'd have to go be the evidence gatherer, basically, or the evidence collector. Mm-hmm. We never dreamed that I'd be wearing a wire. We thought you'd tell the FBI and they go tap phones. We just never knew what we were getting ourselves into. We were young and naive, and we would have never thought in 1,000 years that if we tell the FBI to be gathering all the evidence for them, wearing a wire. That part we never thought of. So she did have some second thoughts, both of us, saying, boy, we've got ourselves in a mess here now.
Right.
Especially when they said it was going to be 6 weeks and it ended up being 3 years.
And so after the 3 years was up, what happened that you all of a sudden you didn't have to wear a wire, but maybe there's some information between there you want to fill as well. I'm just curious, like what happened? Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about the process of wearing a wire, and they were gathering evidence, and so maybe you can tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, the amazing thing is, I do want to make it clear, ADM I think is the 41st largest company in America today, Archer Daniels, and a great company. And the 30,000 people that even worked back then, when this was all going on, I started wearing a wire in 1992. Those 30,000 people went to work on the right thing morally and ethically every day. So Decatur is a great town. The 30,000 people in that company are good people, but there were 4 executives at the top.
Are you still there?
Wife, but I do want to make it clear it's not a bad company. It just had 4 bad apples at the top of the company. Greed focus, selfish leadership. But some of the things I mentioned to you about wearing a wire is I don't recommend it to anybody. It's a lot of pressure. There's some people wear a wire.
He's cutting out just a little bit, Mark.
Can you hear me okay, Ellen?
Yeah, now I can hear you. It's just cutting out a little bit. We're losing bits and pieces.
Okay, but yeah, wearing a wire is a lot of pressure. It really is, and they also had a green lamp that would go from, I would share where we're going to meet with our competitors at, called the cartel. The international cartel is when you meet with your competitors to fix these prices, and we'd meet sometimes 2 or 3 times a month from executives all around the world from our competitors, which were these illegal cartel meetings. I would tell the FBI where the meetings were going to be, and they would have a green lamp in the room, and the green lamp had the video camera. So I would be making the audio tapes with 3 different recorders I had, one recorder attached to my body with an athletic band at my back, another one in a briefcase, and a third one in a special notebook that the FBI prepared for me. That way, in case one recorder didn't work, they'd have 2 others. So we had 3 recorders all the time, at all times. And then they had this green lamp put in the room, and they would be in the next room. So when the competitors are meeting, they could focus that camera with a remote control from the next room and a monitor. The FBI could then, whoever's talking, focus that camera on that person of whoever was talking from that particular company, either ADM or one of our competitors. And that green lamp, it's amazing. It looks like it came from a yard sale. That green lamp would be at places like the Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore, $1,000 a night hotel. And the green lamp looks like it came from a yard sale. And then 2 weeks later, the same 11 guys in the green lamp would be at the Mandarin Hotel in Hong Kong. A few weeks after that, it was at the Four Seasons Hotel in Chicago. And the amazing thing, Ella, that green lamp was at 2 or 3 meetings a month for 3 years. And they never noticed that green lamp was in every room, no matter what hotel or country they were in.
Huh. Wow.
I mean, it was amazing. I mean, it really showed me being informant for 3 years that greed really blinds you, because this green lamp was 5 feet from them. And it was at any room, no matter what country they were in, 2 or 3 times a month. I mean, it was an amazing journey to experience that. And I often think, and I often say, thank God we didn't have a woman criminal among us, because I think if we had a woman with us,
she
would say, hey, that green lamp was following us around the world.
Women do notice those things. They do. So, okay, so then maybe
that's part of the undercover life. And in Japan, the Japanese government were not enforcing antitrust laws very much, and 3 of our meetings were in Japan. So they were afraid if I would take all this sophisticated equipment across customs, I'd have to explain Japanese government what I'm doing. And then they would inform the Japanese companies that they're under investigation. Price fixing is enforced now more than it was then in Japan. So then they felt the government would inform the companies that they're under investigation. So for Japan, they gave me just this little small recorder like from a Radio Shack, something you would use at a university lecture, for example, kind of a personal use recorder, real easy, simple to use. But the microcassettes, you may remember these little microcassettes that were in the recorders from Radio Shack back in the 90s, are 45 minutes each, 45 minutes each on each side. But the meetings are 3 hours long. So in Japan, I'm constantly looking at my watch, run into the restroom every 45 minutes, put the tape on a new side, and get back in that room to continue to capture that meeting. And that's kind of what life was like to be an informant for the FBI.
Remarkable. And at some point, you had decided you had made an unethical choice. Would you like to share that with the listeners?
Yeah, I did. Basically, and there's a documentary on my website from Discovery Channel, documentary from 2010, where it has the real 4 FBI agents that I worked undercover with, and my wife and I, and all the real people involved. 20 years after the case, it was produced in 2010. And one of the longest scenes is a scene I'm ready to describe, and that documentary, like I said, is on my website, markwhitacre.com. by Discovery Channel. And I'm out on the driveway at 3 a.m. I'm wearing a wire for 2 years at that time, and I'm falling apart. I mean, totally falling apart. Because I'm thinking, what are these guys going to do to me when I'm in federal court testifying against them? I said, these guys are going to probably kill me or my family. I mean, the FBI already told me if they caught me wearing a wire, these guys are going to kill me. And so after 2 years wearing a wire, I was falling apart. I had another year to go to wear it. And I was out on the driveway at full immunity signed by the U.S. attorney, never to be charged in this case. I mean, a deal of a lifetime. Because, see, I was involved 7 months before I told the FBI. So I had full immunity, never to be charged, signed agreement from the head prosecutor out of Chicago. The FBI are the ones that proposed the prosecutor to give me that full immunity agreement. And I'm out on the driveway at 3 a.m. And this horrific thunderstorm, and I'm blowing leaves off the driveway with a gas leak blower. And Ginger hears this gas leak blower during this thunderstorm in Decatur, Illinois. And here I'm out on the driveway at 3 a.m. I have to meet the FBI at 6 to get wired up every morning. And she comes out on the driveway, Ginger does. She heard the gas leak blower from the bedroom window. She comes out on the driveway, and she says, Mark, what's going on? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You got to meet the FBI at 6. I said, I know I got to meet the FBI at 6. I've been meeting them at 6 in the morning every day for 2 years. I know what I got to do. She says, boy, Mark, you're falling apart here. You're having a nervous breakdown. And she then said, boy, you said, Mark, you need God in your life. And I said, Ginger, why would I need God? They just announced I'm going to be the next president of ADM. When our president retires, who now was in his 70s, I was going to replace him. I was going to go from divisional president to corporate president, to the company president. Not the CEO, but the president, which is the number 2 executive. I was currently the number 4. So why would I need God? And she said, Mark, you really think you're going to be the next president? I said, Ginger, they've already announced it. I've even got it on tape, them even talking about it. And she said, yeah, but Mark, they don't know you're the informant. That's the only reason why they say that, because if they knew you're an informant, they're still not going to make you president. You think you're going to go to jail and you're going to go to work like nothing happened? And at that point, she walked back in the house, and I started thinking, she's right. There's no way I was going to continue to move up in that company. When I'm testifying against them, they fired me. The CEO, the board of directors were very close, family and friends of the CEO. He was the largest shareholder of the company, and they were going to fire me. I mean, realization stuck in. I think that was part of the stress from bipolar, still thinking I was going to be the next president during that time. And then I thought, well, here's where I end up crossing the line, where I ended up having to go to prison myself. Again, I had full immunity. And that night I made the decision, well, they're not going to give me a golden parachute when they fire me. In corporate America, and Ella, this is true, and I'm sad to say this, but this is still even the truth today, it's easier to get a job as a felon than a whistleblower in corporate America. So here I'm in my mid-30s, and I said, I got my PhD at Cornell at age 25, so I'm less than 10 years even into my career. And I said, I'm done. Who's going to hire me mid-30s when they learn I wore a wire against my own company for 3 years? So I made the decision. I said, well, they're not going to give me a golden parachute. They are going to fire me. I have all these expenses, this large mansion that I bought from, it used to be the CEO's home. The things you do as the number 4 executive in 30,000 employee company. I mean, one of the largest companies in America, actually one of the largest companies in the world. So I lived this very high life because with stock options and bonuses and everything, I was getting in the 7 figures. And that was in 1989 started in the 7 figures. So you can imagine what that's worth today. So I made the decision. I was going to write my own severance package that I'm basically, because they couldn't fire me when they're stealing $1 billion a year. What could they do to me for a few million? And I had stock options, Ella, that were worth in the millions, but I wasn't going to be able to exercise them before I get fired. Stock options mean they'd say like within 5 years you can exercise these. Well, I was going to be fired a year or two before I could even exercise them. Money they actually owed to me. So I thought, well, at least I take the dollar amount to what my stock options would equate to, that even if they did turn it in, a jury would be pretty sympathetic to that because I could prove that ADM owed that. They just owed it to me a later date, not the date, because the stock options, I was going to get fired about 2 years before I could exercise the stock options. So the stock options were worth about $9 million. So I ended up writing 5 checks to myself for $9 million. And at that time, I think, boy, I'm the smartest guy in the room. I got my own severance. I got my stock options 2 years early. When they fire me, I've got time to get back on my feet because, like I said, whistleblowers aren't popular. I got time to get back on my feet if it takes me 2 or 3 years to get another job. That's what I felt, to live that same standard of living that my wife and I and 3 children were living. And that ended up being the biggest mistake in my life. I ended up going to prison for that $9 million.
Well, how did the FBI find out, and when did they finally close in on this company and this price fixing?
Well, when the case went public about a year after that, again, on that driveway scene was 94, so I wore a wire for about another year. And ADM knew about the checks, and they even signed them because they had to sign anything above $250,000. So they even signed them. But the day that the company, when the case went public, that they're now going to start being prosecuted, and they raided the offices with about 70 agents, FBI agents, and got all the computers and the paperwork and everything that support the tapes, the accounting and the finance and the financial reports to show the price fixing to support the tapes. When they did that raid, obviously ADM had to be told about, I was the one collecting evidence for it on Wore a Wire. So that very day that ADM learned that, they told the agency, yeah, but he's no white knight informant. He stole $9 million from us. They were so mad. So in other words, the $9 million was accepted when I worked with them. But once they knew I went against them, they used that against me, and rightfully so. So I gave them the cannon to point at me is what I ended up doing. And I really feel strongly. I think the falling apart. I mean, I was undiagnosed bipolar at that time, Ella, and no one in the right mind would work for the FBI and write $9 million checks to themselves.
Right.
I mean, this was the time, and the FBI, while they're sympathetic today, and they're actually even trying to give me a full pardon, all 4 agents and my former prosecutor, they're all retired now and all applied for a full presidential pardon. And one of the reasons why they're pushing for it, Ginger did push during that time to say, look, you need to get my husband not wearing a wire, and you need to hospitalize him. He needs help here. He's falling apart. He's having a nervous breakdown. And she begged for that for almost a year. And they kept me wearing a wire because they knew if I saw a doctor or a psychiatrist, they're going to say, this guy's falling apart. He can't wear a wire anymore. But they wanted to continue to get evidence. So they feel that they sacrificed my mental health being to gain evidence.
And what
in
about
other
the
words, they
hundreds?
felt the evidence was more important to me. That's why they're sympathetic today.
I understand. And also because you fixed, play on words there, you fixed something. This price fixing is not as prevalent, and you saved consumers, I guess, $100 million a year at that point. So I
think
see
close to $1 billion. I mean, it's estimated close to $1 billion a year for 12 years in a row. Yeah, if you look at all the products that were involved, close to $1 billion a year. So they are very sympathetic today. They see this was just a guy that was falling apart, made a desperate move, and it was 2 years wearing a wire by that point. It was a desperate move of a guy falling apart, having a nervous breakdown. And they see that today. And they're very supportive today, even publicly, they are.
And what happened with people in the company? Did anybody go to jail? Happened besides
people
you?
From all the other companies. The 3 others in the company went to prison. I went to prison for the $9 million fraud. They went to prison for the price fixing. The 3 top executives above me. Other company executives went to prison. Japanese executives were even indicted and convicted, but they didn't show up for trials. So they're fugitives today still. If they showed up in the U.S. today, 20 years later, they would be arrested immediately. But price fixing is not something to go extradite. It's not like a murder charge that they would send U.S. Marshals and go extradite them from Japan. But they can't travel to the U.S. or they would be arrested today, 20 years later. Fugitives. They're on the books as fugitives.
I sometimes have this sense that with these white collar criminals that nobody ends up in jail or no one goes to prison, I should say. So. There were dozens of guys from ADM and all the companies together that went to prison. 3 guys were sent from Switzerland to prison, came over to prison, then went back to Switzerland from some of the Swiss and European companies. So this impacted a lot of people. But ADM was so mad at me, and knowing that I was a witness against them. And I put them in flames. They said, look, let's put Mark in flames for this $9 million, something that was accepted by them because they had to sign anything over $250,000 above, and all 5 checks was above that. So something that was accepted before, but once they knew it, they were even promoting me during that time. I was even promoted to corporate vice president during that time. But they looked at it once they learned I put them in flames. They felt, look, let's put Mark in flames too. If we go to prison, we'll take him down with us. And that's what happened. And rightfully so. I made a huge mistake, and I deserved the punishment I got. And I know I know a little bit about you, I've spoken to you several times, and I get a sense that you've really turned your life around and given yourself over to God and to doing the right thing. And one thing I do want to go back to, of course, is something that people are always curious about, listening to your story. Even when I spoke to you the first time, I'm like, they should make a movie out of this. I'm like, oh, yes, they already did. So, since your story screams for a movie to be made around it, what happened? How did that happen? How did this end up on the big screen?
Basically, there's 3 books written on the case. The first book came out called Informant by a writer who worked for New York Times at the time. And it came out my first few months I was in prison in 1999. And then another book by an antitrust lawyer called Rats in the Grain came out a few months after that. And my wife and I did a book in 2010, but it's more of our faith journey. It came out after the movie, and more about the rest of the story, how we survived wearing a wire and how we survived me in prison as a family, and what kept us together. It's a faith journey. It's sold more in Christian bookstores, called Against All Odds. But the New York Times book grabbed the attention of Hollywood. Again, this was before our book was even out. And that book, which is a very serious drama, it's almost like reading The Firm. I don't know if you remember the Tom Cruise movie, The Firm, which is a fictional story. And the Informant is very similar to that. But Hollywood put a different twist to it. So all 3 books are very serious dramas, but Hollywood film it's more of a comedy, or at least a dark comedy. So my wife and I, and even the agents, had a tough time understanding the tone of it. Not so much the incidents in it in terms of what happened, but the tone of it, kind of because in reality I'm falling apart and tried to take my own life twice. And they wouldn't even show the suicide attempts in the film because that wouldn't fit in a comedy. So they don't even have those in the film. But that was kind of hard to to absorb it. It became a movie in 2009 called The Informant.
Yeah,
directed by Steven Soderbergh and Steven Soderbergh directed it. Matt Damon played me, and really the movie was focused more on bipolar than the crimes themselves.
I was more interested in the crimes. I was very fascinated with that. I love espionage, so I enjoy the film immensely. How did they come up with Matt Damon? Is it the close resemblance?
Well, no, there's no. I always joke and say, yeah, we're identical twins. But if someone Googles me on my website, markwhitaker.com, I'd look like Matt Damon's grandfather, probably. But definitely not. I tell you what, they chose him for because they know he's very likable. And, as a Hollywood actor, and here's crimes and stuff. So they wanted someone that could still do these bad, devious things, but be likable. And they also felt that he was 38 at the time in 2009 when the movie came out. But keep in mind, I started at 80 and 32, but he looked a young 38. So here's an actor that they felt that's a bankable star. He's already Born Ultimatum and lots of good movies. That's 38, but he could look 32. So they made him look younger. As a corporate executive, they made him look 32 years old because he is a young-looking guy. Even still today, he looks younger than he is. And that's how they chose him because they thought in a role, he's still likable even when he's doing devious things.
Yeah. Like you're a likable person, and there's kind of a pureness both in the character that Matt Damon plays and the person that I kind of perceive you to be. You definitely have that within yourself. And it's kind of a contradiction too, some of the things that have occurred and some of the actions, and then seeing who you are today. So you've had a very interesting life. So did you get a chance to meet either Matt or Steven?
We did. Yeah, we did. Yes, we did. We're on our website. We have pictures of the premiere being with Matt Damon and Melanie Linsky, who played Ginger, and Steven Soderbergh, and we got to meet Scott Bakula, who played the main FBI agent I worked undercover with for 3 years, and we got to meet all of them, spend some time with them, and that was a remarkable time. And they were very sympathetic, and they also thought Matt Damon playing a bipolar character, likable. So people would be more sympathetic, him playing a undiagnosed bipolar at the time, because that's really what his part in the movie is someone that's undiagnosed and bipolar and getting worse with the stress of wearing a wire. And I think he did very good with that.
Did he confide? Did he work with you to kind of develop the character? Were you in touch during the actual filming of the, when he was actually filming?
We were in touch with some of the producers and stuff. They wanted my actual business card. They wanted one of the watches that I actually wore. So some of an actual tie that I actually wore during that time that I still had. So we were in touch with some of the producers. But when the director made the decision to take the Informant book, which, like I said, was a very serious drama, and turn it into a comedy, he wouldn't let any of the actors, the agents didn't get to meet the real agents. Matt Damon didn't get to meet me, all of until the filming was done. And the reason for this, he felt like they're all going to meet serious people, like my wife and I today, 25 years after that, in the agents, which are very serious anyway. He just felt like it would really make them hard if they meet with them than to play a part that's comedic for a comedy.
Right.
So he didn't allow any actor to meet the real person until, my wife, who's really serious, he didn't want Melanie Linsky to meet her until after the filming was done, because then it's hard to go play a comedic part in a comedy if you meet the real people when it's quite serious. Now, the agents weren't happy that it's a comedy, and that's why they did the documentary on Discovery Channel. That was their way to combat, I wouldn't say to combat as much, but that was their way to kind of have a legacy to kind of show the seriousness of the real case, in addition to the movie. They wanted a legacy in the case to show all 4 agents are in the documentary along with Ginger and myself. And when people watch the documentary and the movie, and I have lots of friends that have, but saw both, it's not so much they see the accuracy or something different. It's the tone. It's 2 different stories just because of the tone. Because in real life, it's, hey, if these guys catch you, they're going to kill you. And I tried to take my own life twice. But the movie makes it look like it's kind of fun and games, and I'm having a fun time doing this. And I was not having a fun time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know, because sometimes actors will reach out to the person the movie's about just for character development. So I understand now why he didn't reach out to you.
Yeah, because the comedic, that was the reason. And the Informant book was so detailed, they could really capture what they needed. But once the movie was filmed, we got to meet with them. They took us to Warner Brothers in California, and we had tours of Warner Brothers. We were at the premiere in New York. We walked with Matt Damon on the red carpet at the premiere. So we did get to spend time with them once the filming was done.
Mm-hmm. I see. So, and after the film, were you all of a sudden kind of catapulted into any kind of fame or celebrity status?
I would say this, I never was invited to do like one presentation or speaking or anything, because by the time I got out of prison, I was 49 years old then, and it was 8.5 years later. The case was kind of forgotten when I got out 12 years ago in 2006. It was really kind of an old case. The case happened in 1992, and I got out in 2006. And so the movie came out in 2009, so really old by 2009. And I would say this, I never got opportunity to go out and speak and share my story. But I've done, I do 7 or 8 events. That's where I'm just coming in from today from. 7 or 8 events a month, 90 to 100 events a year since that movie, since 2009. Speaking events at large corporations, at faith-based events, talking about a testimony, corporations, mostly on ethics and compliance. And they bring me in, now at age 60, and here I was at 32, to kind of these young executives to hear, boy, don't cross the line. This is serious stuff. Look what I put my family through. So kind of a scared straight program to get their executives, boy, not to cross the line like this. Because here you could have a whistleblower. I play both roles. I'm kind of the whistleblower role, but also breaking the law role. So it lets an executive know you can have somebody blowing the whistle on you if you're crossing that line. Because I was a whistleblower in WarWire for 3 years. So I do a lot of corporate events in very large corporations. Some of these events are 1,500 to 2,500 people and executives. And I think also it's the movie pretty much ends really. It's only a couple minutes after I get out of prison. So it kind of ends with me really going to prison. Because after I'm in prison, it's just only a couple minutes in the movie. And people are interested what's happened the last 25 years, how our family survived it, how I got reemployed as a CEO of another biotech company, and how I got involved in going out and speaking about this around the world. I even did one in Israel not long ago in Jerusalem. And so people are interested in the rest of the story of a real-life movie of somebody in their 30s. Well, how that marriage, we're married 39 years next month, my wife and I, and people want to know how we survived it. And thank you. But people are interested how our family survived it, how our children survived it, how they're all in their 30s now. My children are all older now than I was when I wore a wire. That's how long it goes. But people want to know how you survive that kind of adversity. So yeah, there has been a lot of interest. The movie has, I guess, and the movie has created a lot of interest as kind of what's happened the last 25 years since. The rest of the story.
So it kind of benefited your business life a little bit, or your professional life.
Yeah, it really has. I think compared to most cases where you go to prison, I think in a lot of cases you can't even get employed. Right. Not only did I get employed, I was able to move up the corporate ladder even again. So I think it has. But I think the key thing is maybe not the movie as much. I found the key thing being 12 years out, and I tell other white collar executives when they're coming out of prison, the key thing is really come out and admit what you did. So often people come out of prison and they're still denying what they did and pointing fingers at other people. I found, for me, in corporate America, and to have the opportunity and a second chance in corporate America, probably the thing that helped me the most, even more than the movie and the 3 books, is I think the transparency, really coming out and admit what you did.
I agree.
Admit that you did wrong. Admit you deserve the punishment you got. Admit that you wish you would have done it differently. And I think that's why I've been accepted back to society and corporate America, by just being honest that I made some huge mistakes here, and I'd do anything to help someone else not do the same.
Right. Well, one of the questions I also had for you is, what was in all of this, everything you experienced, just your long journey through all of this, what was your proudest moment in all of this?
I tell you, our proudest moment of all this is that the agents, 2 things. One, I'd say most of all, that my wife and kids stayed with me and loved me as much as they do today, Ella, because the divorce rate when someone goes to prison, no matter if it's their fault or not, there's innocent people who go to prison too, I realize that. But when people go to prison, the divorce rate is 78%, the statistic is, and it's 99% if you serve divorce rate, if you serve 5 years and longer. I served over 8 years, 8.5 years, and married 39 years. So I tell you, the fact that my wife and family stayed with me with a 99% divorce rate, I really believe is a miracle of God. Mm-hmm. So that's by far my proudest moment. And I would say my next proudest moment is, and when I include that, our marriage survived and also my kids, that I'm as close as I am with my kids today after everything that happened. I mean, it was a remarkable journey, and not only did we survive it, we thrived it. And I really give credit to God for that. But my second proudest moment, besides my wife and kids sticking with me, and is the fact that the agents came back and started visiting me in prison, started calling my wife, Ginger, each month to see how she was doing. 8 years they called her each month to see how she was doing. And they started visiting me in prison. And now, like I said, there was even a pardon letters written even this week to the White House, still lobbying for a pardon. And it didn't matter to me if I get a pardon or not. I'm employed. I kept my family. Family survived. So a pardon is almost irrelevant. But the fact that they forgive me, and they also kind of share in the responsibility, knowing that we're in a wire so long, I made some poor decisions under pressure, and then realizing that and taking responsibility of that, and then going public about that is really remarkable. I'm really, to me, that's more important than the pardon itself, that those agents still care for me today after all the mistakes I made.
Okay. And then also, those are extraordinary answers, and I'm glad that everything worked out and that your family stuck with you through all of this, and so that's that. And there's some, you had so much good came out of it for you as a person with your character, and also, what about the corporations out there? I mean, your actions, didn't that kind of prevent that from happening in the future more? And also, is there one message to the industry that you would like to get out there?
Yeah, I answer the first question first, and I give them the one message. Yes, it has. Matter of fact, after the ADM case, and by the way, this case was so large, the equipment I wore undercover is in the FBI Museum in Washington, D.C. I mean, this was the largest, at the time, price-fixing case in U.S. history. I think there's been 2 or 3 larger since then in the last 25 years. But they prosecuted almost 40 cases from price-fixing after that, the Justice Department had. So they saw that if it's happening at ADM, that can't be the only place. So it really has stomped out antitrust and really made where they really focused on stopping price fixing in other products and other companies around the world. So it has had an impact there on people having a more fair price when they go to the grocery store, no matter what kind of product they're buying, food product or non-food, because price fixing being eliminated. And the other thing is whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are better protected. As a result of my case, a lot of whistleblower protection laws have come about that the company can't fire you. So I wouldn't have had to write those checks to myself, because the company wouldn't have been able to fire me when they learned I was a whistleblower. Back then they could, and they did. They fired me the day they learned I was a whistleblower. This day and time, they couldn't fire you legally. They'd have to keep you and keep you in the same position. So the whistleblower protection is really strengthened, and partly because of my case, other cases too, but partly because my case has an impact on that. And also wearing a wire. The guideline now for an informant to wear a wire is 1 year maximum, because they saw what happens when someone wears one for 3 in me, how you can fall apart. So guidelines even for informants wearing wires are better and healthier by having that maximum of 1 year. And I would say from the second question you had, if there's one thing I could share, especially for your young listeners, age, but especially for your young ones that may be over-ambitious or overzealous in their career and trying to move up as quick as they can, the message I would tell them is boy, don't get in a hurry. Don't overreach. It's not worth it. It's not worth crossing the line. Do what's the right thing to do for your customer, your vendors, your employees. It's so much more important to do the right thing to do than the right thing that it may be for you to move up quicker. Or get promoted quicker, or a bigger bonus, which may mean you may overreach and cross that line to get that. So it's so much better to do something what's right for society than what's right for yourself, where you cross that line just for a big bonus, which you may be breaking the law to do it. That I was with the price fixing.
Great
the
answer.
right thing to do. It's not worth crossing that line.
And then what advice do you have for potential whistleblowers out there?
Yeah, for potential, like I said, the protection for whistleblowers has changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something going on, a fraud that's going on where people are hurt, victims, just like even all these sexual abuse cases, Ella, that we've seen on the news these last 4 or 5 months, I think it's important for people to come forward. The only way these things are going to stop, no matter what kind of crime it is, and it's not just white collar crime, but the only way these things are going to stop are people coming forward and telling what's going on. I think it's so important. And like I said, this day and time, whistleblowers are so protected. I don't think they'd be under pressure like I was back then, thinking, boy, I'm going to lose my job and I'm never going to get hired again. Whistleblowers are very much protected today, that they will be looked out after. I really do. I think my wife encouraged me to do what I did was the right thing to do, and we need more people doing that in society.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it was a great interview. I thank you so much. And we still have a few more minutes, so maybe you want to touch upon your book and what's the forecast for you? What plans do you have in the future?
I love what I do. I work for a cancer research company the last 12 years and managing clinical trials for prostate cancer, and I really enjoy that. But I also enjoy, with turning 60 now, and I really enjoy, and I feel like more of the impact I can really make I travel about 3 weeks a month, and you can't do that forever. I mean, my dad passed at 90. He was 30 years older than me, passed last year. So I know you can't do it, and there's still no guarantee I would even live that age, even though he lived till 90. But you can't travel like the way I'm traveling forever. But what I like to do, as long as I still have the health that I have and I can travel the way I do, I really enjoy impacting young people. College level that are in business or in law school or business school or getting MBAs. I spoke at a business school for MBAs just about a month ago at Auburn University in Alabama. I've done several of those in the last several years. But I love meeting young executives in corporations. I did one for Morgan Stanley here not long ago, here in the last month in New York City on a Saturday to some executive, about 80 executives. But I love reaching young executives or young students that are about ready to go into the business world and share this message that, boy, you may have the opportunity to live in a mansion and fly on a corporate jet and all the things I had, but don't cross the line to get there. Don't sell your soul to get there. And that's what I really see, the legacy I'd really like to leave, and what I'd like to do more of for the remaining years that I can continue to travel like this, is to reach young people to look for a life of significance, about how to make the society a better place when they leave it than when they came, compared to how much money they can make and how big of a title they can have.
Right. I agree. What about, we still have a couple more minutes. I'm just curious, what whistleblowers do you admire?
Well, I tell you, I admire Erin Brockovich. I mean, she risked her life as a whistleblower. Erin Brockovich did. And Jeffrey Wigand, he's the one that blew the whistle against Big Tobacco. He went on 60 Minutes and says, boy, these chairmen of these CEOs of these tobacco companies are having congressional hearings and saying nicotine's not addicting. And here he was vice president of research seeing the opposite, the opposite in the data from their own company. He went on 60 Minutes and shared that. And he risked his life, by the way, doing it. He lost his family by doing that. Jeffrey Wigand did. And I admire him tremendously, what he did. They had a movie called The Insider about him. Russell Crowe played him. And then, Julia Roberts played Erin Brockovich in the movie about her. But I admired them. I felt like they did everything for the right reasons, and they risked everything to do what they did. I would put my wife really in the more of the category like them. I was kind of at that stage caught in the middle. Do I not tell the FBI? Do I tell the FBI? I was still a little selfish on the job that I had, wasn't willing to walk away from it. So there was a little selfishness still in me at that stage. So I really put my wife more in that category of what they did. They risked everything, really, to do what they did. And my wife sacrificed. I mean, we were living in a mansion, flying around in a corporate jet, and I ended up in prison. And my wife sacrificed everything to do the right thing.
She just sounds like a really lovely woman.
I admire people like that.
Yeah, I admire your wife, too, just from what you've told me. Jeffrey, I'm in contact with him. I'm trying to convince him to come on the show, so I'll let you know when he comes.
Yeah, I hope he does. It's really, to me, a real a really American hero, and like I said, Aaron Brockovich too. And there's been a few of them like that. But and the FBI, I remember the FBI agent that was on the front of Time magazine was Sharon Watkins at Enron, and Cynthia Cooper, I think, from WorldCom. And then there was another FBI agent. Time magazine years ago had 3 women on it, and I admire that too, those women for what they did.
Well, thank you again. We're closing out here. Just want to say I sincerely appreciate this interview. You take care.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.